I never liked the desert at night. During the day it was tolerable, harsh and endless, sure, but at least you could see what was around you. At night, though, it became something else entirely. The sky swallowed everything, turning the landscape into a void, stretching infinitely in all directions. Out there in the dark, you had no way of knowing if something or someone was watching. My cousin Jalen never worried about things like that. He thrived on the eerie, the unexplained, the dangerous. Every summer he came up with some new idea that was supposedly going to be the greatest adventure ever. This time, it was a trip to an abandoned rail town deep in the desert, far from anything resembling civilization. People say weird things happen out here, Jalen said as we pulled off the highway onto a nearly invisible dirt road. The headlights barely lit the way, the dust curling around the beams like ghostly tendrils. Weird how? I asked, gripping the armrest as the car jolted over uneven ground. Jalen's grin widened. Lights, sounds, people seeing things that aren't there. The whole place is just wrong. I sighed. And you thought, hey, let's go check it out? Exactly. I didn't bother arguing. Jalen never listened to reason, and besides, turning back now wasn't an option. The town had been abandoned for nearly a century, left to rot after the railroad company shut down. Most of the buildings were nothing more than skeletal remains, warped wood barely holding together. According to Jalen, some travelers claimed to have seen lights flickering among the ruins at night, moving in ways that had no business being natural. We arrived just past midnight. Jalen cut the engine and the car's headlights cast long, jagged shadows over the crumbling structures. The moment we stepped outside, the silence hit me. It was too quiet. No wind, no insects, no distant hum of life. Just nothing. I shivered. Despite the warmth clinging to my skin, Jalen was already moving, flashlight in hand. Come on, he said, his voice unnaturally loud in the emptiness. I followed, keeping close. The sand muffled our footsteps as we passed the remains of an old saloon, its sign hanging from a single rusted chain. Further down, the remnants of a hotel leaned dangerously to one side, its windows like empty eye sockets. That's when I saw a flicker of orange in the distance. Look, I whispered, pointing past the collapsed remains of a church. Beyond the town, far out in the desert, a small fire burned. Jalen grinned. Told you we'd find something. I wasn't sure that was a good thing. The fire was too far to make out details, but it was controlled, deliberate. Someone had built it. But who? Nobody lived out here. Even drifters didn't last long in a place like this. Jalen, of course, wanted to check it out. If there's someone out here, they know more about this place than we do. I hesitated, my instincts screaming at me to stay put. Everything about this felt wrong. But Jalen was already ahead, flashlight bouncing with each step. With a muttered curse, I followed. The town disappeared behind us, swallowed by darkness. The fire never seemed to get closer, as if it were always just beyond reach. The further we went, the more I felt it, that creeping sensation of being watched. Then I saw them. At first, they were just shadows against the night, blending into the desert landscape. But then one moved, and another. A ring of figures stood between us and the fire. I stopped so fast Jalen nearly crashed into me. Do you see that? I whispered. Jalen lifted his flashlight and the beam landed on one of them. A person, not just one. Now that the light had broken the illusion of darkness, I saw more. A dozen, maybe more, standing perfectly still, unmoving, watching. Jalen exhaled, sharply, and for the first time I could tell he was scared. They're just people, right? He muttered. I wasn't sure. Their stillness was wrong. People shift, they fidget, they breathe. These figures stood like statues, their faces just beyond the reach of the flashlight. Then one of them took a step forward. No sound, no words, just a slow, deliberate movement. Jalen stiffened beside me. I could hear his breathing, short and shallow. Another figure moved, then another. The ring of them, closing in. "We need to go," I whispered. Jalen nodded. Slowly we turned back, the way we came, forcing ourselves to walk. Running felt like the worst possible choice. Every step I took, I felt them behind us, their silent presence pressing against my back. The ruins of the town appeared in the distance, and that was when we ran. We sprinted the last stretch, Jalen fumbling with the car keys as I shoved him toward the door. He nearly dropped them, his hands shaking too hard to fit the key into the ignition. The headlights cut through the darkness as the engine roared to life. For a split second, I made the mistake of looking up. They were there. Just outside, the reach of the light, a sea of figures standing in the dark. Watching. We didn't stop until we hit the main road, speeding toward the nearest gas station, where neon lights felt like salvation. We sat in silence for a long time, neither of us able to speak. Finally, Jalen let out a shaky breath. We should tell someone, right? But who would believe us? We had no proof, no photos, nothing but the feeling of something watching us from the dark. In the end, we told no one, and we never went back. The stranger in the ruins. I should have never gone to the old town alone. That thought ran circles in my head as I stood there, gripping my lantern, its small, flickering flame barely pushing back the thick darkness. I had told myself I didn't need anyone else. My cousin Jonah had wanted to come, but I brushed him off. I'd been exploring abandoned places for years, and I wasn't scared of some empty buildings. At least that's what I had thought. Now, standing in the middle of that forgotten town, my gut told me I had made a mistake. Something felt wrong. The air was too still, the night too silent. The ruins had been abandoned for decades, maybe longer. Yet at that moment I had the uneasy feeling that I wasn't alone. The town sat deep in the countryside, far beyond where most people dared to go. To get there, I had to cross a dried-up riverbed and push through miles of tall wild grass that tugged at my clothes. The few remaining buildings were barely standing. What was left of a church slouched to one side, its steeple broken in half. A schoolhouse leaned so badly it looked like a gust of wind would send it toppling. The old saloon, once the liveliest place in town, was now nothing but a skeletal frame of rotting wood. I arrived just as the sun was setting, tossing my bag down near the ruins of the courthouse. Most of the walls had crumbled, leaving only a few stone pillars standing like ancient tombstones. The plan was simple: stay one night, explore a little, and head home in the morning. It was just a fun challenge, nothing more. At first I felt fine. The silence here was different though, not peaceful. It was heavy, like the land itself was holding its breath. As I walked between the broken buildings, stepping over collapsed beams and weeds sprouting through the cracks, I felt the weight of history pressing down on me. My lantern cast long, jittery shadows against the ruins, and for a moment, I almost convinced myself that the eerie feeling was just my imagination running wild. Then I saw them. Footprints. They weren't mine. And they weren't old. They were fresh, leading from the far end of town toward where I stood. I froze, my stomach tightening. Maybe Jonah had followed me as a joke, or maybe some drifter had been living out here using the ruins for shelter. But if that were true, why weren't there more tracks? Why did they stop right where I was standing? A cold shiver crawled up my spine. I turned in a slow circle, scanning the darkness beyond the glow of my lantern. The courthouse, the church, the twisted remains of an old wooden fence. All silent, still, empty. But the feeling didn't go away. I knew someone was there, watching. I forced myself to follow the tracks, my footsteps crunching against the dry earth. The prints led past the wreckage of the saloon, around the remains of an old barn, and finally stopped in front of a house. It was different from the others. While most of the town had been worn down by time, this house still stood strong. The walls were intact, the windows unbroken, the door still hanging on its hinges. A single rocking chair sat on the porch, tilted forward like someone had just stood up from it. I raised my lantern, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it, in my ears. Then the chair moved, just the slightest creak, my throat tightened. There was no wind, no sign of life anywhere else. Yet the chair swayed, as if someone had been sitting there only seconds ago. Then I saw the shadow. It stood just inside, the doorway tall and completely still. The light from my lantern barely reached it, but I could tell it wasn't part of the house. It was a person, watching me. I couldn't see his face. Couldn't tell if he was even breathing. He didn't speak, didn't move. He just stood there. Then, slowly he stepped back, deeper into the house, out of sight. I felt my whole body lock up in terror. My mind screamed at me to move, but I couldn't. My feet felt glued to the ground. My hands gripped the lantern so tightly my knuckles ached. Then, from inside the house, a single deliberate footstep. That was all it took. My body finally listened to the panic surging through me. I spun around and ran. I ran past the barn, past the broken schoolhouse, past the dark, hollow windows of the church. My boots pounded against the dry ground, kicking up dust. My breath came in sharp gasps, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Not until I was out of that town. Not until I reached the dried-up riverbed, where I finally collapsed to my knees, gasping for air. Only then did I turn around. The town stood silent behind me, bathed in darkness. There was no sign of movement. No flicker of light from the house, but I knew what I saw. I never told Jonah, never told anyone, but I never went back either. And sometimes late at night, even miles away from that place, I wake up with the same feeling, that someone, somewhere, is watching me, waiting. I didn't tell anyone where I was going that weekend. It was meant to be a quiet getaway. Just me, my motorcycle, and the winding back roads that stretched for miles beyond the city. I had always loved riding alone, the hum of the engine drowning out everything else. No distractions, no responsibilities, just freedom. By the second day, I had made it deep into the countryside, where fields gave way to thick woods and abandoned stretches of highway. That's when I saw it. A narrow, unmarked road cutting through the trees. It wasn't on my map, and that made it all the more tempting. I turned onto it, the cracked pavement barely holding together, tree branches clawing at the sky overhead. It felt like stepping into a forgotten place, the kind of road no one used anymore. I rode for nearly an hour before I saw the house. It sat at the end of a dirt drive set back in a clearing. The roof sagged in places, the paint on the siding long since peeled away. It was the kind of place that had been left behind, yet something about it felt occupied. A single car was parked out front, a rusted blue sedan, older than me, its license plate missing. I slowed down, suddenly aware of how far I had come from anything familiar. There were no signs, no other houses, not even a power line in sight. Just this house sitting in the silence. Then I saw him. A man stepped out from the porch as if he had been waiting. He wasn't old, maybe in his 40s, but his clothes were worn through, his face drawn and weathered. He had the look of someone who had been living outside of time. "You lost?" he called out. I wasn't. But something in his voice made me hesitate. It wasn't unfriendly exactly, just expectant. "Just passing through," I said. He nodded slowly, then took a step forward. "You ride all the way out here alone?" Something about the way he asked unsettled me. "Yeah," I said, keeping my tone even. "Just looking for a place to camp for the night." His expression shifted at that. "Oh, you can stay here," he said too quickly. "Got plenty of space, could use an extra pair of hands for something if you're up for it." I wasn't, but I didn't want to offend him either. "Maybe," I said. "What do you need help with?" He gave me a slow smile. "Nothing too hard. Won't take long. I'll come get you when I'm ready." Something about the way he said it made me want to leave, but he had already turned and disappeared into the house. I sat on my bike while debating. The road had been rough and I wasn't eager to ride it in the dark. Besides, maybe he really did just need help moving something. I told myself I was being paranoid. I decided to stay, but I set up camp a short distance away, where I could still see the house but not be too close to it. I kept my bike next to me, my helmet within reach, just in case. Hours passed. The light faded. I started a small fire, heated up a can of beans, and tried to relax. I had almost convinced myself that I had overthought the whole thing. Then, just as the fire flickered low, I heard footsteps. Not from the house. From the trees. I turned sharply. A shape emerged from the darkness. A figure moving toward me with slow, deliberate steps. The firelight caught his face. It was the man. Except this time he wasn't smiling. "Are you ready?" he asked. The way he said it, like I had no choice, set every nerve in my body on edge. I forced a casual tone. "For what?" He didn't answer right away. He just stood there, the firelight flickering against his face. Then finally he spoke. "Come with me." No explanation, no request, just an expectation. I didn't move. He took a step closer. That's when I saw his hand move. Just slightly, just enough to catch the glint of something metal inside his jacket. My body reacted before my brain did. I grabbed my helmet, threw myself onto my bike, and kicked the engine to life. The tires spun in the dirt as I gunned it forward, barely missing him as I tore away from the clearing. In my mirror, I saw him standing there watching. He didn't run after me, he didn't shout, he just watched. I didn't stop riding until I was miles away, back on a familiar road. Only then did I let myself breathe. By the time I told anyone, there was nothing to be found. The house was still there, but the car was gone. So was the man. No missing persons reports, no news of anyone else going missing out there. Just an empty house at the end of a forgotten road. But I know what almost happened that night, and I don't take unknown roads anymore.